Our first reading will be from Deuteronomy 5, 6-22.
I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of parents, to the third and fourth generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not acquit anyone who misuses his name. Observe the Sabbath and keep it holy, as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, or your male or female slave, or your ox or your donkey, or any of your livestock, or the resident alien in your towns, so that your male and female slave may rest as well as you. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. Honor your father and mother, as the Lord your God commanded you, so that your days may be long and that it may go well with you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not commit murder, neither shall you commit adultery, neither shall you steal, neither shall you bear false witness against your neighbor. Neither shall you covet your neighbor's wife, neither shall you desire your neighbor's house, or field, or male or female slave, or ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. These words the Lord spoke with a loud voice to your whole assembly at the mountain, out of the fire, the cloud, and the thick darkness. And he added no more. He wrote them on 2 stone tablets and gave them to me. And our gospel reading this morning comes from Matthew, chapter 5, verses 1-20, and it is the Beatitudes. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under the bushel basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, Whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever calls them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven.
Good reading. So I decided to put the Beatitudes and the Ten Commandments together. And so I thought that maybe the theme could be laws and lessons, and looking at how they are different and how they are the same. Of course, they were thousands of years apart, and yet both of them were inspired by God. So, what do you think about when you hear the word law? Courtrooms, judges, police officers, well, they enforce the law, and they administer the law. And most of us like the fact that we live in a law-abiding society. You know, if I'm at a light and it turns green, I really hope the people with the red light are going to stop. We know when the rule of law has been broken. The war against Ukraine violates that principle. The bigger and more powerful nations should not attack those that are weaker and smaller. Every child knows this principle. It's called bullying. They learn it in the schoolyard. And for some reason, we as adults forget this. Another way we think of laws is to think about the Old Testament. And most of us know the Ten Commandments. Some of us can recite it from memory. Some of us learned it in our confirmation classes or Sunday school. But Christians make two mistakes about the law. The first one is that we are no longer under the law because we are under grace. And the second one is that Jesus came to replace the law. And both of those are false. Jesus was a very law-abiding Jew. He went to the temple, he made sacrifices, he prayed to God. He was perhaps even a Pharisee. And the Apostle Paul, who wrote most of our Christology and theology, was also a very practicing Jew. In fact, he was a Pharisee before he came to know Jesus. For the ancient Hebrews, the law was essential to their identity, then and now. It defines who they are. And as Moses instructed the people, as he had received it from God on the mountaintop, they heard it. And the law formed them from a group of separate tribes into a nation. And it was then that they were able to enter the promised land. Now, for some people, the Ten Commandments sound like a punitive kind of law, full of thou shalt nots. And yet, it was received as a gift from God, and it was based on the deep relationship that the people of Israel had with God. It was based on what God had already done for them. As you might have heard at the opening, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. And this was memorized by the Jewish people. Now, the people who left Egypt were not the ones that Moses was addressing, because during 40 years, an entire generation had passed away. And yet here they are, about to enter the promised land. And in those commandments, there are some difficult things, like hearing that God is a jealous God. I always thought that was strange because God is supposed to be above those kind of human weaknesses. But when I looked up the word for jealous, it is kana, and it is only used in reference to God 5 times in the Old Testament. So I looked at the root word and I thought it could equally mean zealous. I, your God, am a zealous God. I think that makes a lot more sense. And some things like the punishment extending to the 3rd and 4th generation also seems very harsh and not really very fair as we would expect it. And yet, only a couple of chapters later, this is reversed, and those who reject God are punished in their own person, not to generations. Now, the rest of the commandments, of course, belong to human relations. It must have been a pretty wild time. If it was necessary to tell people to take care of your parents, not to murder, commit theft, not to commit adultery, steal, lie, or threaten your neighbors. But the purpose of the law was to transform the people into a law-abiding society. And the law also gave benefits to slaves and foreigners. They were supposed to be able to rest on the Sabbath as well. And if you listen carefully, the 10 Commandments also recognize women. Now, the law of Moses was what Jesus understood when he referred to the law. This was the law that he had. And as we have followed the life of Jesus through Matthew, Jesus was born, visited by the Magi, ran away with his family to Egypt, and then was returned to Nazareth. And then as an adult, he has been baptized, he has been tempted, and now he is doing his healing and his preaching, and he has crowds of people coming to him. But we don't really know anything about the content of his teaching as yet. We heard him say, "Repent, that the kingdom of heaven is near," but he's just repeating what John said. The Beatitudes are his first manifesto. They are the words that are going to form his ministry from there on. When Jesus ministers to the group of people, he proclaims the good news of the kingdom. But the Beatitudes tell you what that kingdom really means and what the shape of that means. And at the beginning, it is given only to his disciples. Jesus knew that by speaking to the apostles, he was speaking to the people in the crowds. They were the poor in spirit who felt abandoned by God. They were the ones who mourned for the lost kingdom of Israel. They were the meek who thought themselves not being pure of heart or peacemakers. But here's Jesus telling them that they are blessed. And the word blessed in Greek, makarios, means fortunate or happy. These people probably felt anything but fortunate or happy. And Jesus turns his attention from the crowds to his own disciples. He addresses them as you. It is no longer that people shall not commit these offenses. He is talking to you. And how are they going to be blessed? By being reviled, persecuted, and lied about. You will be persecuted just as the prophets were persecuted before you. He knows that John has been arrested and most likely will die. So suddenly the tone has changed from happy to serious. Now Jesus knew that the lessons he gave might have been interpreted to mean that he was replacing the law. And that's why he said, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish, but to fulfill." And he continued his teaching on anger, adultery, divorce, oaths, reconciliation, love for enemies. And he begins each of these teachings with the words, "You have heard it said that," is referring to the law of Moses, of what Moses said to the people. But he never says to abandon or to break the law. What he is doing is challenging to a bigger understanding of what it means to follow the law. It is the thinking as well as the action that matters. He says, murder is prohibited, but so is anger. Adultery is forbidden, but so is lust. The law forbids swearing oaths, but Jesus says don't swear any oaths at all. In his actions, Jesus is teaching them that their righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees. Jesus' lessons are based on the Torah, but by expanding the meaning of the law, he is doing what Jewish scholars call putting a fence around the Torah. The law of Moses had transformative power. They recreated them from a bunch of loosely associated people into a nation. And yet we know that as they were recreated, they became a different people. And the lessons Jesus gave to his followers and through them to us makes us citizens of the kingdom of heaven. Through the Torah and the teaching of Jesus, God is the power behind it. God is the power that transforms us into the children of God, because God has never left us. From the promised land to today, God walks with us. It has been said that God always accepts us as the way we are and loves us too much to leave us that way. Thanks be to God, our Creator and our Recreator, the Spirit that gives life, and Jesus, who was rabbi, prophet, teacher, healer, and ultimately sacrifice. Amen. And our next hymn is Breathe on Me, Breath of God.